I love that people. Oh,
we're live. Say what you love about the people.
I love that people. Andy Serkis shows up in
amazing.
Andor spoilers. He is amazing, but I love that people were immediately like, "Is this going to be the secret Snoke origin story?" And it's like, what about this show makes you think that it would do a secret Snoke origin story?
It made me laugh so hard when people started thinking,
"Oh, there's me again. My audio's coming through."
What's happening?
What's happening? We're in a loop.
What's happening? Whose is it?
I'm glad we sorted this before Kyle got here.
What's happening? Whose is it?
This is. We should start beatboxing.
It's got to be Matt. Matt, it's
got to be you.
Why does it have
to be me? I have headphones on.
Hello, because Kyle. We both muted, but we could hear it. Hi, Kyle.
It's got to be Matt. Actually, not hearing anybody. Hold on one sec.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is the magic of live entertainment. Matthew Rosenberg will be muted for the entirety of the show.
There we go.
Yeah, Matt, the echo's gone. It was definitely you.
Nah, he's got the headphones in.
How about this? Just try popping out and coming back in, and we'll see. Sometimes that fixes everything. In the meantime, hello, Kyle Higgins.
Nice How's it going, guys?
Going good.
Well. We are we're live already. We just decided to go for it and talk to the folks before you got here. Sure. But it's a pleasure to be chatting with you again, sir. How are you doing?
I'm alive. I'm here. How could I be better? How about that?
Now we both walked away from New York City Comic-Con, where of course actually we just met you the first time. This is the background story for everybody, the origin story. The show's
already started, Matt. You're gonna just have to keep up.
You're gonna have to just keep up.
This is by far the least professional thing I've ever been involved with. And I'm really, really proud of that.
Are you?
I'm not positive. No, I'm not positive. Look, I don't. No, that was wishful thinking on my part.
You worked at DC, right?
I work at DC. I worked at Marvel. Right. I worked in.
No, but I mean like old DC. I'm not going to shit on current DC.
Oh, look at that. I wrote one issue at old DC.
Yeah,
old DC.
Old DC.
Maybe you remember it. It was called Black Canary #9.
I actually have it. There was an original art sale this weekend, and I did not pick up those pages. But if they'd been there, still wouldn't have known it was yours.
It was mine. It was mine. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for your support. Hey, should we introduce the show?
I do remember that.
We can do an introduction. This was the cold open, and now we're doing
this was the coldest open I've ever had. I'm gonna
on your own show. Yeah, you invited me.
I know, but I'm gonna say that because you were running late, we lapsed into total chaos. But that's not true. It's not really your fault. It was.
I don't know. Our whole pre-show conversation was very different than what I was expecting it to be, and I think it set us off on maybe a strange foot, man.
Are you talking about the fact that you said in a Jar Jar voice something about your sexual awakening? Is that what you're referring to? Because we were talking about Jar Jar and you went there.
It's a me, yeah.
There you go.
That's more Mario.
That's more Mario, I'd say.
I don't see a difference between the two. Griffin, you should introduce the show, and I'll say why Griffin should introduce the show. Because Ethan, when you introduce the show, you're always at a very professional level.
Thank you.
It's like a solid B. Griffin sometimes brings a real A game energy that is energetic, and sometimes he acts like he doesn't know he's on a show and is totally confused and frightened by
it's a coin toss. And
I love the unpredictability of that. And for the live show that's already started with us having a weird fucking programming loop, I think it's perfect.
Let's see what it's going to be, folks.
What's it
Drum roll.
Hey everybody, welcome to Ideas Don't Bleed.
Fucking not good.
That's a bad one.
I take that back about Black Canary #9, Matt. I think your assessment of this operation might have been accurate from the jump.
It's good. It's good. We're doing good. This is Ideas Don't Bleed live.
I was gonna continue doing it.
It doesn't matter.
Go ahead. Take the reins. Take the reins. Fine.
There's a special live stream. We are joined today by my good friend and wonderful writer, Mr. Kyle Higgins. Kyle, thank you for joining us today.
How's it going, guys? Kyle. Good to see you.
Before the show, Ethan asked me if you and me were friends, Kyle. He was like, "Are you guys friends?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I was like,
because sometimes Matt brings enemies on.
And then I was like, yeah, we're friends. And then I was like, we've had meals together. And then I was like, I don't actually know if we've ever had a meal together.
No, we did. It's when I learned about your chocolate milk sitch.
Okay.
Go on.
And your straight edge.
Yeah.
It was a whole. We had. Do you remember? It was in. I think it was in Emerald City, and we went to that like late night Korean barbecue. Batman dinner when all the writers were still getting along.
Yeah. I was like the only non-DC writer there, and it was.
But even before that, we had. That's what it was. Before that, you and me and Donnie and a few others were having. We had dinner, like. In an area of Seattle, which now, by the way, I was there a few months ago, and like I didn't realize heroin was just so easily there.
Seattle is wild these days. Seattle is like, if you want to see people put things into their body that they shouldn't, they'll just do it right there in front of you on the street.
Yeah,
it's a bummer.
We have that in LA, but they're more boutiques than.
Heroin boutique.
No. I'm saying people putting things into their bodies that there are so many elixirs and.
You're talking about crystals.
I am talking about crystals. Yeah,
that's fair.
Grinding up crystals
But yeah, so we did have a meal together.
At least one.
Yeah.
Basically, you're my best friend. Okay, got it.
Sure. I haven't seen you in a couple years. You refuse to do. Are you retired from conventions?
No, I'm not retired. There's a pandemic on, Kyle.
I'm just asking.
No, I haven't done.
Word on the street,
There's no word on the street that I'm retired.
How would you know? You're not out there.
That's true. I'm not on the street. I have no idea what the word on the street is. But I'm not retired from conventions. I just haven't done any. I haven't seen you. But I live in a city. You could come here and hang out with me.
Where are you at?
I live in New York City.
New York. Yeah, I've been there.
New York City. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. You've heard of it. It's on the map. If you ask Ethan and Griffin where they're from, they'll make up a place.
That's not true.
Every time I ask them where they live, it's a different.
You just don't remember. You're not retaining information about us because it doesn't matter.
Ethan looks like he needs to be rescued wherever he is right now. That like you need a plant, bro, like or something.
Yeah. It's my bedroom. I think that's generally the vibe of my bedroom.
You have two doors behind you. One leads to safety, and one leads to the decapitator. And
one's a gateway to hell,
or his closet, or his closet. You can have clothes. You could have.
It's funny. It's funny you say that because you've said that about here. I have another recording spot, and I think the last time we were there, Matt said that I looked like I was recording in a boiler room. So my house is taking a lot of flack. It's brutal.
Look at Matt Rosenberg's background. Now that is the background of a man who wants people to think he's a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true. And it's stressful. It's really stressful to look at.
It's called cosplay, and it's important to me.
Your hat is like you are perfectly accent colored out. From your background. It's delightful.
Thank you.
I think it's great.
If we're going to talk about backgrounds, let's talk about that nice Nightwing poster you got going on.
That is a nice Nightwing poster, yeah.
We're going to talk about Nightwing.
So actually, there's a funny little story about that Nightwing poster.
Let's do it.
So Nightwing is my all-time favorite character. Since I was like 10 years old and realized that Nightwing existed, was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also the first book that I read and bought every month, like as an ongoing. I mean, I was reading comics, but like, they don't understand, Matt, what it was like before you discovered a comic book store. It was like, it was the spinner rack at the grocery store in our generation, or not even a spinner rack, just like they had sometimes spinner rack. But so you were getting books like, and especially that era, it was like part one, like there were 4 Spider-Man titles, and part 1 would be in one title, and part 2 of a story would be in another title, and part 3 would be in another, like web of sensationalized, like 1/2 issue. And so you couldn't follow anything.
Yeah.
But I picked up Nightwing like 16, and it was like a low enough number where it was like, oh, I could actually keep going with this. And I already really liked the character and had kind of discovered them. That's why I picked up the issue, and the color scheme was like really, really striking to me. And so when I got hired to do Nightwing for the New 52, I actually went on eBay and found that poster, which was, and it pops up every once in a while, but I haven't really seen it in the years since. And this was back in 2011 now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the promo poster that went out to stores in the for the launch of the Chuck Dixon Scott McDaniel series, which was
awesome.
the only other Nightwing #1 before my Nightwing #1. And so I actually knew Scott when I was much younger, and Chuck I'd met at conventions when I was, growing up as well. And they were always so supportive. So I reached out to both of them and asked if they'd sign it for me. And so they both have signed it. One was like, welcome to Bloodhaven. And the other is from one wingnut to another. So it's a little faded back there now, but I always thought that was a lot of fun. So
that's good. That was a really good a Nightwing story.
That was a good question that, teed me up to, your producer did a really good job with the pre-interview, man.
Yeah. They were like, hey, do you have a poster on your wall?
I don't know if they're associated with this podcast or anything, but whoever called me and
said, what's on your wall?
and asked me for personal information and stories that now that I think about it, they would have been incriminating.
Yeah, we're gonna get to all of that stuff. We're gonna get to all the legal stuff.
I probably should have checked the number with you before I just told a stranger everything about my life.
That's fine. That's fine. We're gonna act responsibly with all this information.
Sure.
It was Chip. Chip does that from time to time. All right. Yeah. He somehow finds out about the guests we're getting on the show, and then he'll go ahead and he'll do those sorts of.
But the thing is, what the best part about when Chip does it is that he's an outside in actor. So he dresses up like Matt before he makes those phone calls.
Yeah.
Despite that, it's just audio. You can't see him.
You've seen Buffalo Bill, right? Like it's Chip doing a Matt voice.
He's very method. It's unnerving, but it's beautiful. I think there's a lot of beauty in what he does.
Yeah.
I don't say that about Chip a lot, but there's a lot of beauty in when he's pretending to be me and getting people's social security numbers.
Chip's turn as Matthew Rosenberg, I think, is really I think this is the year he gets.
If there were an award for acting in life, that role.
If there were an award for being a grifter, it would be Chip would get it. He's so talented. But enough about Chip. Let's talk about you, Kyle. Sure. I like to do a little background. And actually, the thing that I'm intrigued about by you, which we've talked about in person, but I'm always sort of fascinated by and wanted to know more, and it was sort of the first thing I wanted to know, was you got into comics in such a truly weird way, because creating them, not as a fan, but you got in through filmmaking. And I sort of, I wanted you to tell that story, but also I was sort of wondering, is this where you want to be? You sort of fell backwards into this thing, and it's.
I don't know. I don't know if you've been seeing any of the stuff we're doing lately, but it does tend to get a little outside of the medium, doesn't it?
Sure. I mean, I'm just sort of fascinated by the there are so many people who work so hard to get into comics, and obviously you're a lifelong comics fan, but you weren't working to get into comics, correct?
Well, no, but also to be fair, there was an opportunity, the window to an opportunity, it felt like that was opened, and I can tell the story in a second. And it was something that I looked at as well, there's no way I want to pass on that. And I had tried to make comics in high school, and draw them as well for a period of time.
Can you draw at all? Are you
not really? I mean, I could do. I can do something if if I gun to my head, I can kind of get by with something. But I can definitely capture more gestural than I have no talent for I have no talent for rendering, or how to really depict it's but I was always really growing up, I copied a lot of things all the time, other drawings. I was really good at that, and that's kind of how I got to understand a little bit of anatomy and then shot compositions and stuff. So I guess I had kind of dabbled in it, but you're right, it wasn't something that I was actively pursuing. Whether I want to be here or not, I do, of course.
That was a joke.
Well, it's a complicated answer in that my relationship with comics and storytelling in general in different mediums has changed over the years, and certainly since COVID started. And so now a lot of what I'm looking to do is actually kind of I like to describe it as taking full advantage of a concept. And for me, a lot of the fun comes from playing with form and medium. And that's also allowed me to utilize some of these other kind of skills I've had over the years and have been developing the background and really trying to get back towards when it comes to things like directing. And, you know, most people don't know, like I was a sound editor for 10 years and worked in post for a long time. And, you know, also have this directing background and a little bit of graphic design and things like that. But as far as how I got into basically making comics, it was because of a film I directed in college. So it was a little superhero noir about the 1960s superhero labor union of Chicago. It's called Cowl, or no, actually it was called The League then. That's the name of the short. And it's, you know, we shot entirely on Super 16 millimeter film. I had this kind of, especially then, I was very kind of knowledgeable in post and post-production workflows in an era, like we're talking 2006, 2007, when it was very complicated and a little dicey sometimes, whether you're going to get a good image out if you didn't have like truly knowledgeable pros working on your stuff. And when you're in film school, you know, we had the building at Chapman University had opened only a year earlier, this particular like expansion building. And it was like beyond cutting edge. And we had our own Spirit 4K film scanner and different data cine setup and we could do all this awesome color grade stuff and offline and online editing with like an Avid Unity server and stuff like that. But you're matching back to film, but having to edit video, but it has to still match back to the key code on the film. So it was very complicated to do stuff like this. But I had enough background in VFX work that I knew kind of what we were going to be able to pull off, and we designed the film just beyond the scope of what we thought we'd be able to do, and which was already ambitious. And then it almost killed us doing it. But when I finally finished it, and I had graduated at this point, and then spent another 6 months on it. A good friend of mine, I haven't talked to him in several years now, but at that time became a good friend. Eric White had designed all the characters and reached out to me after, you know, he saw how it all turned out. And Eric was a comic book illustrator and a cartoonist himself. And he just really, really liked how the short turned out. And he's like, "Do you have an agent?" And I was like, I'm 23, man. I just graduated like last month. No, I don't have an agent. And so he offered to introduce me to his. And then one step further, he was like, "If you can get down to San Diego," and I was in Orange County. He's like, "If you can get down to San Diego, I've got my wife's Comic-Con badge. So like come down and like, I want to introduce you to some people, like bring copies of the movie." So I burned all these DVDs, and the cover was, and this will all loop back probably at the end. The cover was very striking. It was something I had definitely invested time and resources in. And a friend of mine, Owen Colgan, who's a big concept artist at EA Sports or EA Games. And then he was one of the early guys at Riot. He designed like the majority of their like biggest champions. Lucian is his design, stuff like that. So Owen painted this cover for us. And so the DVD and the design packaging that I mocked up for it and everything was very, very, you know, striking. And so that made a world of difference. Yeah. And so Eric would introduce me to people, and I, you know, give them this disc. And so I got back to LA, and suddenly I had like some meetings on an unfinished movie. And then when the movie was finished, Eric sent it out a link to our very polished looking website, and, you know, the Vimeo film version of a Vimeo link that was embedded into the site, and it was all very clean. He sent it out to like 200 people, everyone he knew in film and TV and comics. And one of the first people that wrote back was Joe Quesada. And he said that he had watched it, and that my love of comics and filmmaking showed up in every frame. And if there's ever anything you can do for me, to let him know. And I wrote back, and I was like, "Well, I'm a big fan of your work." And I was, and said, "If you're ever looking for any writers, you should let me know," you know, because again, looking at, well, this is something I wouldn't mind exploring, you know, and I didn't think I'd have that kind of opportunity that quickly. And so then you blink and suddenly you've spent 12 years doing it full time.
That's I love that story because it's such a weird.
Oh, hold on. Let me add an addendum to that, because this is the important part. So Tom, that sounds like it's, and then you're writing at Marvel, right?
Sure.
That's not how that went. So like, that's the thing. I feel like on this podcast, this is probably a good place to like actually contextualize then what actually happens after that. Right. So like you get the opportunity, and Tom asked me what kind of characters I liked. And I told him, and I even pitched doing the League as a comic. And he's like, well, we don't do creator owned, so we couldn't, and it already exists now. So it'd be too complicated. And so he said, here's what I'm going to do. I find in these types of situations, it's best for you not to pitch to me as the editor-in-chief. Right. And I, looking at it now, like I totally get it. It makes total sense. At the time, I'm like, okay. So how does it, he's like, I'm going to send the movie to all of my senior editorial staff and see if anyone bites. And if they don't, then I'll circle back and we'll figure something out from there. And so I got an email from Tom Brevoort one day. I don't even know if he liked the movie. He's never actually said. But if you know Tom, like he's just very, to the point. And he offered me an opportunity to pitch. But the thing is, it wasn't with any specific parameters beyond like a single story, like a one shot. Let's start small. And so he's like, well, if it's a good story, we'll find a place for it. So I spent a year writing up. I pitched over 20 one-shot ideas, 20 fully like broken ideas for one-shots.
At once or over a year?
No, at least 20 over a year. So it would be every few months I'd send in a few more. And then it'd be like a week would go by, or a few weeks would go by. Because, you're at the end of the priority list for an editor. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. And so he would get back to me eventually and go like, okay, I like these. He's like, but I've shared them with those books editors. And then it's like, they don't know who I am. Yeah. Right. So then I kind of figured out a way to, he finally told me where he had some slots open that were more specific. Cause I started looking at what books I knew he was the editor on just by picking up books on the stands. And then when I was able to get more specific parameters out of the 25th pitch that I had, turned in, then I catered something. It was actually with Alec, who had written the League with me. And it became a Captain America Theater of War one shot. And it just so happened we pitched a World War II story as he needed a World War II story. And he had said he needed a World War II story, but it all kind of coalesced. Yeah. But then it was a year before my next book, which was an Avengers one shot. Within that time, though, I was able to connect through our Captain America artist's agent with some other publishers as I was looking to try to do the League as a comic. And that also included an introduction to Mike Martz, who was running the Bat office. Sure. And so then you just kind of start trying to lay different, groundwork where you're able to. And it was, So it's definitely a longer form kind of.
Do you still have all those pitches? Like, are those saved in a file that you're like, these are good ideas? Like, have you revisited them and been like, there's something to this? Or?
No, there's one issue. There's one story that came really close to happening, and it was actually Brubaker that killed it. And then when I saw Ed, when I met him in person, because we knew each other over email because he was very supportive of the short film. But when we met in person for the first time, the first thing he said to me was like, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry I killed that story. It was great. Like, but I kind of wanted to rip it off, But no, I totally understand. Like, especially where that character was at that point in his run, he had, cool plans for him. But it's a pitch that I still really like. And when I did the Winter Soldier one shot or miniseries with Rod Reese a few years ago, I did go back and look at it to see if there was a way I could use any of it and it didn't fit there, but it's something I would like to do one day. But yeah, beyond that, I haven't looked at any of the other ones.
Yeah. It's always funny to me because I feel like especially when you're starting, like you said, like people don't necessarily understand that like a lot of what happens is like editors ask you if you have ideas because they've already got all their bases covered, and you sort of have to give them something that they didn't know they needed. And it's sort of this weird thing, and you end up with a lot of people end up with this slush pile of unused stuff that like I'm always sort of fascinated by. And I went back and looked at some of my early stuff and was like, oh, none of this is publishable. Like, this is terrible. I'm so glad that it didn't go through. But it is always funny because like every once in a while you'll find the thing where you're like, this is really good. And
and then there are things. I've been really fortunate in my career thus far in that pretty much everything that I've ever wanted to do and make, I've been able to make. Like, I don't have a lot of stuff that died that I was really invested in. The one that didn't go is something that very much has inspired something we're going to be announcing pretty soon.
You want to announce it here live on YouTube for 22 people?
Here's what I will say. This is by far, without a doubt, the most ambitious thing I have ever tried, ever.
Awesome.
And I say that I don't know if my camera just cut out, but my monitor did.
No, your camera's dead.
I was just going to say, and I say that with including the fact that we just did a surprise 5.5-minute fully animated short film voiced by Will Friedle as an Easter egg in an issue of Radiant Black. Like, what the thing that's coming up is very, very ambitious. And so but it originates from a project
that died
that I was going to do with Tim Sale. And it died at, it died where it died well before, Tim unfortunately passed away this year. But we're going to dedicate the first issue of this new thing to Tim.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, wow.
When can we expect to see whatever this mystery thing is?
A couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
Oh, shit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we really basically had you on the show just like too early.
2 weeks too early.
Yeah.
2 weeks too early. We fucked up.
I think it's something that do you know what it is, Matt? Did I tell you about it?
No, I don't know what it is.
Okay. When we announce it, if you do want to talk about it, I'll
a follow
potentially come. Maybe. Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe.
Okay.
You might be too big for us by then. That's
no.
fine.
I mean, I definitely am already, but
yeah, no. You're already slumming it here with us, and that's nice. Did you see how this podcast started? It was real rough. You shouldn't be on here. This is bad for you.
I'm just glad most everyone has headphones.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, Ethan hasn't. I thought I could only see one of Ethan's ears.
There you go.
He does one like he needs to have situational awareness because he's in a dungeon. So
Well, I'm always scared somebody's gonna sneak up behind me out of that gateway to hell.
yeah. You got to be careful about that. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Kyle.
Yeah.
I think you're sort of a fascinating person to me because
thank you. Love that.
Yeah, well, wait to hear why. It doesn't go good from here.
It never does.
No, I mean, I knew you from the New 52 stuff, and then we knew each other from around at shows. Yeah. And you were from
our single meal together.
From our single meal, we got to know each other. No, but we table next to each other. We'd hang out at the bar or whatever. And you were always this sort of. I was just like, Kyle very much knows what he wants. You were very focused, driven writer, and I always found it really interesting and inspiring that you were like, I want to do these things. I want to move here. I want to do these things. And it was really. I felt like a lot of times in my career, I was kind of just like, I don't know, man. If someone says something cool to me, offers me something cool, I'll do it. And you were like, no, I'm very, like I plan things. And I always thought it was very interesting, but I didn't sort of understand the scope of what you were doing. And then you went from being like, the Nightwing writer and doing a bunch of other stuff to Power Rangers. And I was like, okay. And you were like, well, I like Power Rangers. And I was like, cool. That's cool. Like, I didn't grow up as a Power Rangers person. So like, to me, it's, it doesn't have any emotional attachment. So I'm like, oh yeah, it's a book. It's boom. It's cool. It's respectable, whatever. And then you parlayed that into
Right.
all these different things, and you like embedded yourself in the Power Rangers community really well, and you were making films, and you were orchestrating all this stuff, and then from there, like, it just exploded in all these different directions that I think is so, like, there are not a lot of comic creators who I talk to where your name comes up, where people don't just be like, man, Kyle in the last few years has really become this, like, you're this industry. Like, you've become this like mogul in this fascinating way that, like, I now can look back and see it. I can see when we were talking,
Yeah.
you were still like a DC writer. I can see you being like, yeah, I have eyes for bigger things and all this stuff, but I didn't quite understand it at the time. And like, I guess my question is, like, where you are now with what you're doing with like Radiant Black and the Massive Verse and all this stuff, like, how much of this is built off of experiences you had in the moment, and how much is like, oh, always knew I was going to do this? Like, maybe not what the book was, but the bigger stuff. Like, how much of this is planned for you?
So, sorry, I have the most emotionally needy cat. I'm actually my desk is in standing mode to try to prevent that, and that doesn't
seem to do
discourage
great.
him at all. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you to even acknowledge. It's weird when you're kind of in it and just like, all I'm doing is these, I feel like most of my days are spent paying invoices these days. Invoices and Zooms and, awful podcasts that are actually delightful,
I don't know anything about that.
Well, I'll send you some recs.
Oh, thanks.
We're putting that on our fucking cover at the full quote. Actually delightful.
Actually delightful.
Yeah.
But no, I would say a lot of it is planned. Like, a lot of this has been planned for quite some time. But it's also, it's weird. It's, you hear that colloquialism about luck being opportunity meeting, what is it? Opportunity meening like readiness,
preparedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, preparedness. And there's certainly some truth to that. When I always had in my mind the idea of the type of, and I think you guys will understand this. I always had in my mind that the idea of the type of creator that I wanted to be, and in the types of spaces I wanted to be working in. Mm-hmm. And I had the beginnings of the types of stories I wanted to tell. At least, and I was fortunate in that the types of stories I wanted to tell tended to be more, psychological thriller or superhero like stuff. And, I ended up, at least at the New 52, I ended up in hindsight, it didn't feel like it at the time. In hindsight, I ended up in definitely one of the better groups to be in during that era, like by far, if not the best, working closely with Snyder and navigating the politics and also editorial and above editorial and all of it. And no one coming from a bad place, but just there's a lot of competing interests and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And there's just a lot to figure out as a young writer, and also trying to figure out how to be consistent. But the longer I've done it and worked in comics, the clearer what those things and what those stories and types of in different medium swings and where my priorities, where I want them to be at, the more that has become kind of clearer. Like, I'm able to not only see it clearer, but I can articulate it now. And part of it has always been about, like, for example, like starting a company that's more of a creative collective comes out of a place of wanting to work with my friends, because that's what I love. Like, I say this, like, and it's true. The best part of comics is the collaboration. My favorite part is collaborating with my friends. I have no life. Like, this is just what I do. I work with artists and creators kind of around the world now. So I'm answering. There is always somebody up with a question. Like, it doesn't matter what time of day.
Yeah.
And so there's always things to do. And I embrace that in this era of my life. Like, that's what this era is for me. I'm in the like hunker down in my, my little apartment in LA with my very needy and emotionally complicated cat. And I'm just making stuff. We're just building universes and things like that. But for that to be possible, the truth of the matter is, you need the kind of right platform opportunity to kind of do it from. And, Todd McFarlane has given a lot of interviews over the years. There's a really great one he gave with Complex a few years ago, where he went through, it's like a 45-minute video, and every comic creator should look at it because it goes through how he built the foundations of what has become his empire, right? And the core foundational piece is Spawn.
Yeah. But
Spawn is built off of Todd's work on Spider-Man. And that work on Spider-Man being so defining that he really, it was an era where you could be kind of, I don't use the term brand in a negative light when I say brand here, but like Todd's art and the way he approached comics and the types of characters that you could tell the ones he loved to draw, right? Those are the ones he then basically you focus on and you build out your Spawn, and you're trying to bring readers as well as just people with any sort of general awareness of comics to follow you to the thing that you own, etc. Now, the reason the video is so fascinating is because those opportunities, when it comes to, say, Marvel and DC, which for a long time were where that's the best spot to build out something that you could then kind of, go and do your own thing off of and springboard. But for whatever reason, to me anyway, and I might be totally off base here, it has felt for some time, definitely for the last 5 or 6 years, like that's really tricky to do with these characters. And I think in part it's because runs have been shorter and there's been so much rebooting, and certainly the New 52 kind of broke things. And then there was reboots after that. And now it's all kind of, it's just a little different. And so with the exception of like, Matt and David Aja's Hawkeye, and I would actually point to Hawkeye and then Matt jumping and doing Sex Criminals with Chip is actually a platform jump there.
Sure.
Because it's the same, it's the tone, it's the voice. You're coming for this voice, right? And so this is all a long-winded way of saying that when I was doing kind of the DC stuff, I was watching the way Scott put rooms together and how he kind of navigated as well. Like, okay, I'm doing detective and now they've put me on Batman at Batman #1. Well, where do I go from here? And to me, it was like, oh, wait, what do you mean? Where do you go from here? And he's like, well, you have to think about that. And it hadn't really occurred to me. But then you look at it and it's like, oh yeah, when you're out writing the main Batman book, where do you go? You go to Superman, or you go to Wonder Woman, you go to Justice League, but that's kind of it, or then you go to a B kind of list character and reinvent them and hopefully get them to pop. Obviously, Jeff did that for a lot of years as well.
Sure.
But it's kind of a path if you're even fortunate enough to get on, the right one of those paths where the roller coaster is actually works, where it's going up as opposed to stalling out, which is what often happens when you get on some of these books.
So do you feel like Nightwing's part of that path for you?
Yes. In some ways, yeah. And Nightwing's what helped me do Cowl. And I have a complicated relationship with my time on Nightwing and with the book because it wasn't a great experience, but also it's an experience that I became a much, much better writer as a result of. And like, I like to look at it now as though, some of the work I don't, I'm not in love with, but it's cool that I got to have that type of relationship with my favorite character where I became a better wrter from working on him. Absolutely. And so that's helped. But the cool thing was that I think it was a book that did well within the New 52 and was selling well. And it's also kind of the book that I was able to then meet Eric Stevenson at Image because of them. And so I started developing a relationship with Eric and Image, and we did Cowl, which was the beginning. And now Cowl is a part of the Massiveverse these years later. But we did Cowl as my first creator-owned book at Image. It's funny you bring up Power Rangers, because to make a longer story, hopefully not too much longer, but really to bring it back home, the whole time I was doing New 52 stuff, I was doing comic book conventions as well. And this was an era where there was this little group of us in LA that tended to just end up at the same kind of launch day signings or local shows, local regional shows. So it was me, it was Brian Buccellato, Josh Fialkoff, Sterling Gates, Eric Wallace was in there, JT Kroll, certain times those guys were around. And the thing that was striking to me was like doing conventions on a regular basis now as like a pro, and just meeting different fans and readers. I was really surprised by how prevalent Power Rangers was amongst convention goers. And so I actually brought up to Boom to Bryce Carlson, who I'd gone to college with coincidentally, while I was doing Nightwing. I was like, you know what you guys should do? Like, you guys should get the license for Power Rangers one day. Like, you could build out, like, I kind of just saw it. It's like, you could build like a kind of Teen Titans or X-Men type superhero series, teenage superhero group book, and take full advantage of the concept and not be limited by pre-existing footage and kind of all that stuff. And Bryce, like, it's funny you bring that up. He's like, we've been talking about that because the license is going to become available. And so then they didn't end up getting it. And so Paper Cuts announced that they were doing it. And so I kind of forgot about it after that. I was like, oh, I guess it didn't work out. And then fast forward a few more years, and because Paper Cuts didn't really do anything with it, they put out a few kind of like contained stories that were basically just episodes of the show that were designed to kind of be in that tone and everything. And suddenly Boom announces in this press release that they have the license, and they put out these covers that Goni Montes did of all the helmets. And they look like shiny, like brand new, like Ferraris, and it was like that. They get it. That's what this book should be. And so I reached out and was like, I figured the book already had a creative team, and I was like, who do I have to kill to write a pitch for a backup? And hopefully not you, Bryce, because you're the only one I know over there. And they didn't have a writer yet, but my name had come up because of Bryce's, like, because we talked about it all those years ago. And so I had like a few weeks free in between going to make this little short film. And so I worked up a take on Power Rangers on how I would do it, got the gig. And then that became the thing that it's like those platform kind of properties or books, I should say, are hard to find. And there hadn't been anything like Power Rangers in comics, in superhero comics. And there hadn't been anything like superhero comics for Power Rangers. So that became the kind of, to me, the platform that kind of made sense to tear out from, especially when Eric Stevenson asked me if I'd ever considered building an original superhero, because he thought there'd be a market for original superheroes. And so that from like that minute, it was like, yeah, okay, I see it now. And then we actually waited on Radiant Black on announcing it and debuting it until after Ultraman came out, because in the same, kind of tokusatsu adaptation space, or at least aesthetic influence, you can now, I was hoping it would create a pattern with retailers where it's like Power Rangers to Ultraman, to Radiant Black. And that fortunately is kind of what happened.
One of my questions here that you sort of answered was, what's the deal with like ninja type dudes in motorcycle helmets? Like, why you like them so much? But
you know what? I do have a good answer for that, because the other thing that Power Rangers really kind of changed for me as a writer, there were two gentlemen I met, Matt Groom and Michael Basudel, both of whom are kind of integral pieces of the Massiveverse here. Michael edits and does all the graphic design for all of our titles. He also builds our websites, and he's just, he's incredible. Matt is the creator of Infernal Girl Red, and wrote Supermassive with us, and is doing the new Supermassive with us as well. And they ran a Power Ranger podcast. And so I met them when the book was first announced, and they had just reached out asking, or one of the readers tagged me on Twitter if I would do an interview. And to your point about the Power Ranger community, fan community. Like I didn't know the community whatsoever. And I figured, well, I'm entering into something that I know has a very big community. And so this might be a good way to try to figure out the lay of the land and just get a sense of things, because they were really, really nice, these two guys. And Michael's in the chat. And so after the first episode, I had this idea that I've kind of always, and this comes from my filmmaking kind of background, I love director's commentaries.
Sure.
Like in high school, I started animating trailers for Moonstone Books, like for their comics. And I would put on director's commentaries because it's like 14-hour days in a chair doing all this in After Effects in like 2002, 2003. And so anyway, I got super into director commentaries as a young filmmaker, wannabe feature director. And so I was like, I've always wanted to do one on a comic series that I'm writing where you do it monthly, where you do basically an episode for each issue. And so that's what we did for Power Rangers. And through kind of getting to know them and, their help with things behind the scenes, I think that not only was the material better on the book, but I discovered that I really work best with other people. Like I work best as a writer when I'm able to talk through things and kind of kick the tires on things kind of more organically that way. And it also meant that I think some of their influence also rubbed off on me. And, I became more comfortable with two things as a now getting a little older writer or creator: optimism and ambiguity. And those are not things that I used to be comfortable writing about. And Power Rangers really kind of changed that for me. And so the other thing that happened was Matt and Michael introduced me to where Power Rangers comes from, which I knew already, Super Sentai, and especially Mighty Morphin coming from Jew Ranger, the season Jew Ranger. But I had never watched any of the stuff. And as they started kind of showing me episodes, I kind of fell in love with this medium in a way, or sorry, not medium, this genre, called tokusatsu, which really just means special effects filming, but it's taken on, the helmeted transforming hero is certainly, an archetype of it. The kaiju Godzilla in this space as well. Well, I was totally burnt out on superheroes.
Yeah.
Not only as a fan, but probably mostly I know this as a creator, when you're working on it every day and across all these genres, and then I'm just not into it anymore. And tokusatsu became this kind of thing that was exciting to explore and to just be a fan of again. And the conventions and different storytelling conventions are quite different, and it's just different. And so that's really where it kind of comes from.
And so that's all stuff that you wanted to carry over into Radiant Black and sort of make your own. That's awesome.
I describe Radiant Black as Power Rangers with adult problems.
Yeah. I had we should take audience questions in a minute, but I actually had a question first, which is about the character Marshall in Radiant Black. What is his fucking day job? It seems like he's like a guy who pairs weed with movies. What is this job?
Okay, so he's very entrepreneurial, and he works at a retro video rental store that I wish existed in my hometown called The Real World. And he likes to use his position there as a platform to try out his business ideas on customers, which are actually a series of one-page comics that we do as back matter in issues where I bring in different, most of the time, brand new creators to do a one-page story that we then publish. And it just has to be Marshall pitching a crazy business idea. But when we first meet him in the store in issue 2, the marquee says, ask us about our what? Oh, it says, now featuring or guest starring CBD oil. It says, ask us about our What Lies Beneath plus Bath Bomb special. And so he's trying to sell these themed movie bath bomb pairings. it's become a recurring gag throughout issues, and so far that we actually then made them as a part of his idea when he becomes Radiant Black, spoiler, was he needs to help his PR. He needs to like fixes his image problem. And so there's this YouTube channel called Circle Guy News that just trash him. And we did this on real Twitter before people realized it was part of the book. We had an account that did this, and Bill, Ryan, and TJ, who run the Invincible podcast, they are actually Circle Guy News, and they are drawn as such in the book as themselves. And so Marshall sits down with them with a business opportunity pitch, which was they do his merch and he gives them access. And so the first thing they offer is a help welcome me to your neighborhood Radiant Black black box. And inside is a bath bomb with the Radiant Black logo on it. It's also a secret mystery box with invisible ink and QR fake in a different language that you have to translate to unlock a USB drive that is password protected. And yeah, it's a whole thing. It was fun.
It just makes me tired for you, like on behalf of you.
You pressed vinyl.
I know, and I'm tired all the time.
Are you still doing that?
Yeah, well, they're still in the queue making them, but we're not making any more. But like vinyl production is just a nightmare. So like,
I'm embarking on that with something at the moment. And
yeah. Well, we should compare. If you want advice or need help or anything, let me know. And I'm the person who could tell you what not to do. I can give you good advice on that.
I should not do it with a product that has a firm FOC date.
Yeah. or like a limit on how many you can make, because people, when they want more, there's not a way to adjust for that.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
Well, we got one question, if you don't mind, Matthew Rosenberg.
Let's do it.
From Owen Saylor, which is also my main question for you, Kyle. So it's perfect. What is the process like for managing / overseeing all the books over at Black Market Narrative? And they want to know about books in the Massive Verse, but also other books like Ordinary Gods and Last Flight Out. This is the main thing I've been so curious about, is like with bringing in these new books with new creators that several of them, start in places that seem entirely unrelated, but they're part of this universe. So yeah, I've been so curious what that's like, shepherding people in and connecting it all.
It's fun. It's fulfilling. It's a lot of work, because it's basically Michael and myself across everything. And on a given day, that's to varying degrees of success. We're a little tired at the moment, but there are some things in our process that I think are incredibly efficient and is part of why we're able to run as many projects and books in the manner we're able to. And there are other things that it's like, oh man, this is just one of those opportunity costs where it's like the manual labor side of this, is something that we can't afford to alleviate at the stage. Like, for example, like I do all the pay statements by hand to every single creator. Michael does the accounting, but then I'm generating the pay statements and doing all the wire transfers or ACH payments or PayPal payments or whatever form of money is going. And then I have accountants that help me, and anyway, sort of, yeah. So, but stuff like that, it's like, that would be great to not have to do myself, but that just, unfortunately, the opportunity cost right now means that you have to. But as far as like the big stuff that I think is integral is, and I am a firm believer in this, we basically run everything over Google Chat. Over the years, Matt, you got into comics still at the right time when creators were using Google Chat. It felt like everybody was on Google Chat, and so it just became, and there was a period where like I think when AOL Instant Messenger we were still using, and like that could integrate into like iMessage and GChat, and it was like one thing. So people were using that a lot. So I just kind of have stayed on it over these years.
It's the original Hive.
Yeah. But my Black Market kind of email setup, I have set up as a company or as an organization kind of within Google. And so we actually run everything in threads and chat rooms, and then all of our scripts, all of our docs are all like Google Doc based, so everyone can see things at all times. You can leave comments on things and stuff like that. Slack would probably be better for this, but I can't. I'm too ingrained between GChat and Dropbox. Those are our kind of big core things. And I set up. I'm really big on systems, and Michael's really, really good with systems. Mm-hmm. And so like our file structure is real well maintained, and so it's so that side of it's really efficient. But then beyond that, like, yeah, I kind of, for me personally, I kind of play a different role on each book, it feels like, and I kind of come in and out at times. So like I'm really, really involved getting it off the ground. And I think I've casted most of the artists on our books, as well as colorists. And that includes like when someone needs to step off, like Chris O'Halloran wasn't able to continue on Rogue Sun just with his schedule. So we had to find a new colorist who also fits. That just comes from many years of relationships, from working on a lot of books and knowing different art agents and just having a love of comic book art. That's probably my favorite thing about comics to this day is like, I'm still amazed by like finding good artists, finding exciting artists is like the thing that makes me like still get excited about stuff. And then seeing them turn in awesome stuff, So that there's that side of it. And then I kind of serve anywhere from like a consultant. I would say I'm more of a kind of creative consultant on Rogue Sun. Like I got it set up for Ryan. But Ryan knows what he's doing. Ryan knows how to run, long running books and things like that. So Ryan and I we talk through stuff all the time, but I'll call him with stuff I'm trying to solve on Radiant Black and vice versa. Dead Lucky, I'm a little bit more of kind of a creative director on that one. Just in that, like, Melissa and I worked really, really well together on Power Rangers because she was the exec on Power Rangers at Saban and then Hasbro when I was doing the books. And that continued on, with us working on the video game together that I wrote for them and the short film and stuff like that. And so it's fun, like, we have a really good style of communication and kind of help. So, and it's her first book. So helping her kind of, Matt, I'm sure you've gone through this a ton where it's like you read sometimes a script or you'll see a script and you're like, I know why you're doing that. And like, I did the same thing. That's not the move. And and it's hard to articulate why, other than that I know it won't work because I've done it and it didn't work. And it would really need to be, but this is really hard to explain why what I'm pitching will work, know? And so that's been actually part of it. That's been really fun for me and incredibly frustrating is like for the last 2 years, like learning how to give notes and learning how, I've always given notes to friends and other creators, but in a way where it's like, especially if someone pushes back and then you have to figure out like, well, why am I reacting the way I'm reacting to this thing? Is it because I just wouldn't do it this way? Or is it because there's something that I believe is like a tenet of storytelling for what I believe makes a good story that now I have to figure out a way to articulate that's helpful and additive,
Yeah, I always people come to me and sort of ask me for reads and notes a lot, and I always have. And I sort of, I think when I was at Marvel, like a decent number of the Marvel writing staff would like send me stuff and bounce stuff off me of like the exclusives, and so I was kind of always giving notes. But I have so much respect for editors who can articulate what the problems are because I have such a hard time doing it, and it's so much easier for me to be like, this is how I would do it. Do you like this more? And like, that's just how my notes are so often of just like, I'm going to show you what works for me. I don't know why it works for me exactly, or I have a hard time getting it out to you, but like, here's a different approach. And does it make sense? So like, yeah, I think being a creative who has to give notes is a real different skill set.
Yeah. And the other thing too, is that between the massive verse and then the stuff that's not in the massive verse, it's been fun to kind of, it's been fun for our kind of vision of it to evolve and kind of change as we find the things that we're enjoying doing and also the things that are working. But the one thing that's kind of consistent across the board is that everything that we are doing, we're trying to build out with a really, really strong visual identity. And Michael, as the unifying kind of factor across all of these things, is really great for that. It also means, though, and this is why I flagged earlier that, like, when we did the League and I had the DVDs and the cover was really striking, and, you know, we'd invested in that. That's something I've always been a kind of big believer in. But it was Stevenson that said it to me a couple of years ago. We were talking about marketing and how, you know, a lot of creators conflate noise with marketing. And I had asked him, I said, well, then how do you sell a book in 2018, whatever year this was? And he said, it really comes down to it being a book that you're presenting with such a confidence and clarity of vision and presentation that it's like undeniable. And so that comes down to your logo. It comes down to your title. It comes down to your pull quotes. It comes down to your colors, your interior design. You know, all of that stuff matters.
Sure.
And that's something that it's been really cool to be able to kind of art direct with Michael on a lot of these books, and then going out and finding cover artists that I think are in the same, you know, space, and Michael as well. That's been the stuff that we've really enjoyed. And also the stuff that has there's a bunch of other stuff we're working on that hasn't been announced, like a lot of stuff that, like, maybe too much stuff, but we'll get through it. And that's the thing that has resonated kind of the most as well, is that everything that we're putting together with and for other people, being able to build it out with this very contemporary kind of lensing has been something that, you know, is definitely additive for us.
Yeah, the aesthetics you guys have is so, like, I read the first arc in single issues, but then I picked up the trade and was giving it a reread last night, and like that volume 1 cover, and then I was like, man, they have spot gloss on this. And I was like, it's a $9.99 book and it's got spot gloss, like there.
But that's we said, that was our call, you know. And oh, you're saying it because you know what it costs to do.
I know what it costs, and I'm like, oh, they are really not sparing expenses to be like, this should be a beautiful, and it's one of my favorite covers of the last few years, is that trade cover. I mean, it was like a B cover, right?
Well, it's actually an even crazier story. So during once I had the idea for Radiant. Okay, so I had the idea for Radiant Black when Eric pitched me this thing, like building out a contemporary superhero. I had been working on something that I was going to do with a different artist, and then schedules didn't work out. It was like kind of more of like a 6-issue, like post cyberpunk, post tech dystopia kind of future, like a Mad Max Blade Runner type kind of future. And it originally was going to be a digital series I was going to do with Jason David Frank after our Power Rangers Coinless series didn't work out because Hasbro bought Power Rangers overnight for $500 million. And understandably, prior, you know, projects were no longer interesting to them. But I was going to do this book, and it just was kind of this thing that was it was called Radiant Black, and it had miniature black holes as the iconography. It was much more of like an Aragorn, Lord of the Rings type story, where it's like the return of this thing that had been whispered about, you know? And when Eric asked me about doing a contemporary superhero book, I was immediately like, well, the iconography and the name, I think, and some of the backstory I was building out, I was like, if I did that contemporary, that could really be a cool book. But then it became, all right, if I'm going to do that and I'm going to take that swing, I want this to be something that I could write for 10 years or 15 years without hating it. And it should be something that can grow and change with me. And, you know, it's Kirkman that I've heard say it, like, you can't pick your hits, right? Well, I was basically sitting here going, Power Rangers to Ultraman to Radiant Black. There's a reason why the book's not about me, but there's a lot of me in the book. And that's by design. And that also includes taking these crazy swings as we're trying to launch it with this big animated trailer, bringing in a theme song, like doing all the stuff that is a celebration of the reason that I love superheroes, the stuff I grew up on, the different cartoons, the different movies, the different ways that the movies were made back then. And so that cover actually was a still frame from the trailer that Eduardo Ferragato did storyboards for. And then Marcelo did as a finished in an animation style, cell shaded still frame that Alex Siegel, who co-created Cowl with me and who I taught him how to video edit when we were 16 years old. He now he shoots for Bear McCreary and cuts all of his videos. And he cuts all of our stuff with Black Market, all of our trailers. He animates them. He's exceptional. Well, Alec wrote for years for me, so his storytelling, sense is off the charts. Well, Alec animates the thing, and we all love how the trailer turns out so much. Marcelo goes, "Hey, I have an idea," and he takes that image and he then does it, finishes it as a cover. And it's one of those moments where you're trying to find a brand identity, but you can't force these things, right? The second that I had that Radiant Black design from Marcelo, sorry, I jumped ahead, I'm a little all over the place, but I'm a better rewriter than writer. Once I started building this out, like, okay, let's do the Radiant Black contemporary. Let's put a lot of myself into it. Let me build something that can talk about my fears and failures and just my look at our generation, where we're at, and all of these other kind of issues and stuff I hadn't really seen in books in this way. And then when Marcelo nailed the design is when I was like, I'm going all out. Like I'm going to build this out to be something that can't be denied. Like I want to take a really massive swing with it. And so in the 11th hour, that was not even a cover. Like we had the A cover from Michael Cho, because that was something really important to me. He was the first person I asked to do a cover, because again, I wanted to try something really bold and striking. Sure. And then that helped settle our, he did some tweaks to the logo that put it at a tilt. That influenced how we developed the look of those early issues, like the logo that we were using now on a tilt. That particular cover, I actually was calling Jeff Boysen a few days before FOC, and I was like, or maybe it was a few days before announcement, either way, and I was like, should we add a cover? And he showed it to Eric, and Eric said absolutely. And so we made that an issue, an open to order B cover. And when it printed really like not great. There's this weird gradient banding down it that's kind of like a green to purple tint out. And as we were discussing what we're going to do for the trade, Marcelo said, well, we all thought this was the cover, including Eric, for the trade. And Marcelo had this idea of how to do a series of them going forward. So we all embraced it. And then it was Marcelo and I that went, let's do this. Let's kind of redo this cover for the trade and make sure that blue, because Marcelo before he was drawing Radiant Black, he was a colorist for at least 10 years full time. This is the book I kind of pulled him from coloring to do Radiant Black. And so he made sure that the cyan and everything that he was doing for that cover was pure. So it's not going to print muddy. And that's why it says kind of like vibrant as it is. And then the spot gloss. So sorry, that's like print nerd shit. But
no, I liked it though. It was good.
Yeah.
I mean, the spot gloss thing, because I got the trade from you at New York, and I read it in the airport on my way back, and I was just rubbing the fucking spot gloss. The spot, like it's a big difference.
Well, that comes the reason why we did it. I mean, maybe we would have done it anyway, but I was adamant about it from the get-go, because I did a book a few years ago called Hadrian's Wall, and it's the soft touch finish on the cover, and our book it's black, but there's no gloss on it at all, and I actually think it looks really cheap as a result, because spot gloss or soft touch black tends to print muted, so your blacks aren't very rich on it, and then if you don't have spot gloss to create, at least, I don't know, spot gloss to me is like the great like equalizer of like any design, and in some ways it makes it just, some things pop. It feels a little more kind of prestige, and I don't know. I love it.
Do we have more audience questions? I feel like we do.
We do have some folks from over on the Substack. Owen's Reviews also did want to know, what is Marshall's last name?
I don't think we have revealed it yet.
Stay tuned.
yeah, it's not like a reveal. I just don't want to say it. If I
Oh my God!
Now
What if
it's
it was?
built-in.
What if it was Spielberg?
Oh my God.
guys, it's Rosenberg. I'm not.
Oh my God, that's a great last name.
Lucy.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
No, I just don't want to say it in case it's until it's in print. It's not canon. So
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Fair. Well, we got the Substack questions. I can kick us off
Sure.
if you'd like with a question from Dan. What are a couple of your favorite comic stories of all time? Ones that really blew your mind.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a good question, but it's also, I feel like it's a question that kind of comes down to eras for me. You know, I think it's the combination of when you read something that's as important as kind of the quality of the material. You know, I tried to read Watchmen when I was 12 or 13 and I didn't get it, and I was bored and I didn't keep reading. And then I read it.
You should check it out. It's pretty
I read
good.
it. Does it have? You think there might be?
I don't know. Give it another go.
Yeah,
It holds up.
But I read it at 18 or 19 in college and loved it. I think like from a really young age, trying to think. Well, I would say a lot of Darwin Cook's work was really kind of important and influential to me, even in ways that I didn't know then.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not stuff I would have said was my favorite, but looking back, it's the stuff that has stuck with me the most. Right. I love all of his Parker work. It's in the same space as kind of any of Ed Brubaker's work and what Ed and Sean do together. Mm-hmm. I think for my money, Invincible is probably the best superhero comic run of all time. And that's, I say that only having read it a few years ago for the first time. Like I read it during COVID. I had all the hardcovers here that Sean Kirkham had hooked me up with years ago. Or no, not even years ago. It was like right before the world shut down. And so I just read it all over the course of like 2 months. Mm-hmm. And all 144 issues. And it was awesome to just find something to be a fan of again. Yeah. Like the swings that it takes and the way that book grows and matures. I don't know that I would have said that about it if I read it 5 to 10 years ago, but reading it now, having built an original superhero series myself in Cowl, and then also building, work for hire superheroes for many years, like reading it, I have so much respect for what it does and the kind of inside baseballness of it all and everything. Mm-hmm.
So. It's funny because I when I talk about books that are a huge influence, and I love Invincible, I talk about The Walking Dead a lot, and I think people are like sort of caught off guard and they're like, really? And I point to this moment in The Walking Dead where there's a spoiler, so everyone can earmuff if they don't want to hear a spoiler for a book that came out 11 years ago. But The Walking Dead, there's a scene in The Walking Dead where they get to this town and it's all safe and everything's okay, and they're told like, you can stay here, but you have to turn your guns over, and we don't have weapons. And they all sneak out and go and get their weapon. And they're like, they sneak out and they're like, we have to get our weapons back. Like, it's not safe. These people don't understand the real world. And there's this moment, and you're totally with them as a reader where you're like, yeah, I know what they've been through. I know what they are up against. Like, they do need their weapons. But then there's just this realization that's like, oh, they're the villains now.
Yeah.
And like, we're now following the bad guys because we've watched them be on this journey where they have no choice but to be bad guys. And the book sort of goes back on that and circles around. But it was a moment that I've never had in fiction before because I spent so long with those characters and so long. And the way that Robert Kirkman and Charlie Adler and all them like can take a story and maneuver it to new places and recontextualize everything that came before and make it mature and make your perspective on everything change in the story is like, it's a moment that, like Spider-Man's always the good guy in Spider-Man. Like you never have a moment where you're like, oh, is Spider-Man actually the bad guy here? Like there are moments, but that's not the arc of it. Right. But like in Walking Dead he does that. So it's funny to hear you say like, yeah, Invincible for me, the way the book matures. I was like, yeah, The Walking Dead, the way the book matures for me was such an eye-opening thing for me as a storyteller.
Yeah, and it's weird because you get asked a lot like what's your favorite comic, or I get asked a lot like what my favorite movie is. And I always like to say that it's like, or I'll ask people if I turn around or talking to friends or whatever, it's like, well, what are your give me your top 4 favorite movies today? Meaning like, it's like there's a recency bias, but it's also like what off the top of your head, like the caveat is like it could change tomorrow, because it really does.
Yeah.
It's tough to narrow down. But what I go back to more, like increasingly, my all-time, I always say and it's true, my all-time favorite movie is Memento. It's not a movie I rewatch all that often, but the reason it's my all-time favorite movie is because of what it represents for me as a creator.
Sure.
And it being this, the epitome of taking full advantage of a concept. And I have this whole kind of story I walk through about it in the moment, like you're talking about in Walking Dead, where you're like, I didn't know you could do that. And it makes perfect sense. And it's this great, kind of combination of, again, concept, theme, but also, saying something. Well, that would be a theme. And just being really innovative while still playing within an established genre that also is, happens to be something that I really like. I don't think it's his best movie. I think The Prestige is his best movie by far.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, especially for emotionally and narratively, I think it's far more complex.
I feel like people are weird about The Prestige. I feel like people aren't so hot on it. I love The Prestige.
I love The Prestige. I'm more of a Dunkirk person, but
I would have loved it so much if you were like, actually, Batman Begins.
I think Batman. I really like Batman Begins.
It would just be a hot take.
It would.
Tenet.
I love Tenet.
Tenet fucking rocks.
Yeah.
I am not a Tenet fan.
He's not.
Oh, damn.
You didn't understand it.
Exactly.
Do we have more questions, Griffin?
Yes, we do. Yes. We got one from Brian. Question for Kyle. You are the master of the Power Rangers Radiant 90s feel stories and characters. What other genre would you like to explore that would surprise your fan base and the industry?
Well, it's funny because I think what would surprise the industry and fans might be to know that I've done stuff in those other genres. They just haven't bought them. But Matt, you get that, right?
That's a good line.
No, I like a lot of crime fiction, and so I do some work in that kind of space. But like, like I tend to like doing, for a while I was doing a lot of sci-fi noirs. It felt like even Cowl is this very noirish period piece. Historical fiction is a lot of fun, and I haven't done a ton of that. I've done some, and I've done these books that like definitely have touches of it where I go, ooh, yeah, that would be fun to actually really dive in on the right thing and commit yourself to one day. So one of the first big Batman book I did at DC was this series called Gates of Gotham. And it was this kind of then and now murder mystery of, and Scott and I did it together. But, he helped me break the story, and then I wrote it. And then I brought in Ryan Parrott actually to write the last 3 issues with me, because I was then doing New 52 and just was way over extended as a brand new writer. But it was looking at kind of the beginnings of Gotham City, and it was looking at kind of like the rise of the first skyscrapers and the building of a modern, America through the lens of 1880s Gotham and the families of power, the Waynes, the Elliots, the Cobblepotts, the Canes, that really kind of shaped the future direction of the country and specifically the city. And so diving into all that stuff was like a blast. And I was on a big Devil in the White City kind of kick around that. And my dad is my dad's really an engineer and has, he's a really big train aficionado, and like still like chases steam engines and goes out and does like photo shoots and stuff like in rural places with like historic steam engines that have been restored and run on tracks for rail fans and stuff like that. So all that kind of stuff is fun to me, but it's also like, I'm like, I can't, like, I know what I'm doing right now through 2024, like probably including 2024. So it's the idea of adding anything else is really, really scary and daunting. No matter how much the genre would be fun. It'd be cool to do a Western one day.
Yeah.
You know, that'd be cool. Yeah.
They ever gonna make that Devil in the White City movie? What's Leo doing with that?
I don't know. He's had the rights to it for a long time, if he still has them.
Do we want to go do a quick quiz? Do we want to wrap things up?
I've got one more question,
Ethan.
All right. I just felt like, things had come to a close.
No, we got one more.
If we want to artificially lengthen the podcast,
we're not. It's not artificial. This is very organic. Everything
about
this
feels synthetic. I don't know.
Wow. We'll wait till you hear the question.
Okay, this better be good, Griffin.
We don't have we don't have
we don't have
I'm looking down the line of the questions.
I knew it.
We did Owen's, Sebastian's. We answered.
I had a feeling in my gut. We do this professionally, man.
I will ask one question to end it.
Okay.
And this is a question that I wouldn't normally ask a creator.
Who am I shit talking about?
Me.
Okay.
Why do you hate me? No, this is
you want it alphabetical, numerical,
a chronological.
Did it choose your own
path?
Or?
This is definitely not YouTube gold. I appreciate that.
It might be unbacked gold.
Yeah. So my question is, basically, I wouldn't ask anyone else this because I don't think other people's careers work the way yours does, and it sort of goes back to the question about planning. But like, do you have an end game with Radiant Black? Do you have a final story? Is it going a place? And as I started to write this, I realized I was like, the question I really want to know is, do you want it to keep going after you die?
Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? Like, that's something that you don't really think about. You think you have an answer to one way or another when you start a book. Mm-hmm. And look, it's one thing to think that, and to think and believe, even if you've gotten to a point of being cynical, and so if you're believing that something's going to work and you've lasted this, 10 years in the industry, maybe there's a shot that it's going to work. Like if you really think you're attuned to the different levers that need to kind of be working in your favor on a book, and that includes the creative, it includes the marketing, it includes the angle, it includes the market, it includes all of these things, right? Presentation, all of that. It's another thing for it to actually work. Mm-hmm. And so going through the experience of it working, and then also the scaling that we've done kind of at the pace we've done it. Mm-hmm. The short answer is I don't know. Because I for sure have an ending. But at the same time, the way that I've built everything thus far is I know what the first 36 issues of the book are.
Okay.
And there's stuff in the book next year that we're doing that is also very ambitious. And I think once that stuff starts coming out, I think you'll see why I'm being kind of cagey here.
Sure.
About what the direction of the book, the future of the book, whether the book even can exist anymore. That's all stuff that there's some big narrative swings coming up. So I would say though, somebody warned me at one point, not warned me, but they were politely telling me yeah, I wouldn't let other people write my characters. Mm-hmm. And I was because I was talking about bringing on co-writers for some of these, issues. And I brought on quite a few co-writers. And I didn't really understand I definitely didn't understand when they were saying it, why. Mm-hmm. but I understand it now. I don't agree with it personally, but it's an interesting experience when it's, again, like watching Cherish build out Satomi on Radiant Red and watching Megan and Melissa build out Eva and Radiant Pink is awesome. Like, I love that. Sometimes I feel bad giving notes but they're also part of our, the main Radiant Black kind of book, and Marcelo and I have to steer that, and we have plans for things as well, Yeah. So that experience has been something that's changed kind of my feelings about it, because now I've done it and other people have written my books or my, our characters. And, also I have, Alec Siegel and Joe Clark come on from time to time and co-write with me. And Joe is one of my oldest friends from high school as well. And so that's been really cool. I could see, whereas I think like, sorry, get my cat from behind my computer. Whereas I think for a long time, like the idea of like letting someone else write the main series solo was like absolutely a non-starter for me before. I think with where we've kind of gotten to in our heading, like it's definitely not a non-starter anymore. Like I'm more comfortable with the idea of it. Now, whether that means like, should the character continue on like after I'm dead? I mean, on the one hand, like what the hell am I going to care? But on the other, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Yeah, screw it. Let him keep it.
This isn't legally binding. You can change your mind.
Decided right now.
Yeah. But well, that was a great answer, and I appreciate all your thoughtfulness on the topic, Kyle.
I got nothing else.
But more than anything, I appreciate you coming on, man. I miss hanging out with you, but also it's really fun to get to pick your brain on this stuff, because like I said, like you're the creator more than almost anyone else in the field that I look to, and I'm just like, how is he doing this? Like, it's so inspiring and intimidating and impressive, and I've just been in love with it the whole time, and so it's great to talk about it.
Thank you. That truly means a lot, and it's also one of those things where like I don't know who. I assume no one knows what we're doing. No one's watching. Like I'm just doing this with my friends, and it's. But also, like, social media is obviously very different than it was. It was always a lie to begin with, but now it's like now a lot of the people that I enjoyed interacting with like aren't even there, So like, but sorry, I don't know if that's really loud or not. The phone in the back.
You're getting a call from the 1950s, dude. You got to.
That's what I was thinking.
It's my bat phone. I'm not kidding. I have a red.
Oh my
God. 60s landline bat phone over there.
Wow.
It used to be next to my desk, but no, we're just kind of making the stuff, and like I assume that pros don't care or know what we're doing. Like everyone's involved in their own stuff, like we all are. But the thing it does, like, I'm not gonna lie, like it's fun when I hear from other people and pros I respect that they dig this stuff. And at New York Comic-Con we did an exclusive for Radiant Black 18 where it was the origin of Radiant Yellow. So he can perceive all the different branching points kind of in his life, and he can place his consciousness into basically any choice kind of moment of him, and then perceive out. It's kind of the Doctor Strange thing a little bit. With what we're doing with this is ultimately is pretty different. But the point is, for his origin, I thought playing with form, it'd be really cool if we told his origin issue as 4 eras of his life all at once. Each era separated by 18 years for issue 18. So it's 1984, 2002, 2020, and 2038. And you can read it as I wrote it with Lawrence Holmes, a friend of mine, a radio personality in Chicago. But I structured it so that you can read it as page turns, right? You read left to right because it's all double page spreads.
Mhm.
So you read the top row, then the second row, then the third row, then the fourth row, turn the page, top, second, third, fourth, right? But for New York Comic Con, we printed a version. We only made 250 copies, but I really pushed for us to do this because I wrote it to work this way, where it's an accordion fold out. So you can actually, it's all 22 pages out like this. So you can read one timeline all the way across, one timeline all the way across, et cetera, and then they converge at a moment when he touches the radiant, and you realize that they're all being perceived at once. It's a really cool, like, different, reading experience. And that's the stuff, like, there were, Capullo was very complimentary. I'll say that. That was, like, really, it was a fun moment. There were a number of pros that were very, very kind of complimentary about it. So,
well, Ethan and I were fucking stoked about it when you handed us a couple of copies. We were very much the walk back to the hotel that day from the con was like, how the fuck did he do this? This is so that as aspiring creators, that was super awesome to see. So
Absolutely.
Excellent work, sir.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's you just got to make the stuff. Like, that's what it comes down to. So
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kyle, for coming out and spending time with us.
Yep.
Absolutely. And this is the end of the show. We added an ending in here, but for you two folks, this is the end. Get out. Go home.
Go get out of here and directly to ashcanpress.com, where you can subscribe for more podcasts and comics and all those sorts of things, Matt.
Yeah.
Yes?
That's all true.
That's true.
You just want it wrapped. You just want it done.
No, that was
All right,
good.
we're hitting
It's
the
great.
big red button. We'll be gone in a second.